Okay, it's 11 past. It's 11:11, by the way, so I guess it's time for me. So before I get started, I'm going to have a live demo that requires network. So if you're on the Wi-Fi in this room, could you, please not be on the Wi-Fi while I do the presentation? You know, just in case. Thanks. Also, a great party yesterday, I think. There's no booze left in Torino, by the way. Okay. Hi, I'm Erik Hellman. First time here at Droidcon Italy. I've been to a bunch of other Droidcons. Always a pleasure. Great to be here. Definitely coming back. So I'm going to talk about, the title for my talk is Working with Google Assistant. Now, names are hard. I submitted this proposal back in November, I think, so the Google Home had just been released. And while I was working with the presentation, I realized it's actually not like Google Assistant we're going to talk about today. So let's strike that one. We're changing the title. So then Google has a developer page called where there's actions on Google. That's what you're going to work with when you work with their assistant. So let's rename it to that one. But the more I worked on this, and I realized that it's actually not the actions on Google that I'm going to talk about either. So let's change it again, because, you know. So we're going to build a chatbot. And Google has a service that's called API.ai, the company they bought. So let's go with that one. But let's not make it specifically about API.ai, because most of the things I'm going to talk about will be more about what to think about in a technical matter when it comes to designing chatbots, which is a very interesting concept. So let's strike that. Let's just say we're going to build chatbots. We're going to make a new Clippy. Well, hopefully not, but yeah. Also, I'm very proud to announce that my session is 100% fragment-free. Worked hard for that. Actually not, because there's not going to be any Android on this at all. Yeah, I know. How dare you? Let's move on. So, who here has the Google Home at home? All the GDs in front. Yeah, so I got two, because that's the kind of guy I am. So I got one in the bedroom, and we got one in the living room. And this was, when I set this up, my wife was about to leave me, basically, because another tool, another gadget. Yeah, but now she's actually accepted, and now she actually likes it as well. So I think it's great. It has its quirks, and sometimes you get really annoyed at it. I'm going to show you later an example of that. But the Google Home is basically one of the type of chatbots that you can do. You're going to show it in the end. I'll talk a little bit more about the other ways you can integrate with this. But we're going to focus on this one at first. I would have liked to bring it and show a demo, but I'm going to use a web simulator instead. I'm not that brave that I'll actually set it up here. Also, it's a little bit small, so you guys in the back wouldn't see it. So Google tries to make us create our own integrations with this. So they have this picture here of my personal chef. You ask it for a recipe and it tells it back, and then you can ask about how to make that dish, because that was their example. A little bit weird. But if you go to developer.google.com, you will find more information about this and how it works. And the nice thing is that Google made it super simple to create your own chatbots. It's so ridiculously simple to do it that it's there's probably some magic box somewhere that they're not telling us about. They have a diagram. So the user invokes something saying, hey, I would like to talk to, and something. And that invokes a trigger, so the system takes that one. It generates a dialogue output, which means that the Google Home talks back to you, saying something, maybe asking a question or just responding to a question back to you. And it processes, and it goes in turns like this over and over until you're done. That's how they explain it. It's basically this simple, but as you're going to see, there are some things that you need to think about. So there are two ways to interact with the Google Home or Google Assistant. It's direct actions, which you can't use because it's under like protected thing. And that's a shame because most of the things you do would be something like direct actions. Now you can do similar things using the IFTTT service, you know, if this then that, and connect that one to your Google Home. But it's not as smooth. So the direct actions, you can sign up and hopefully get access if you have a cool enough service. But for now, we are going to use conversation actions. So I guess most of you have seen a demo of Google Home. You talk to it, and it answers back in a nice voice. A chatbot is like another chatbot inside the Google Home. So the best examples, if you have a Google Home, is to use the Uber integration, which basically you switch over to another chatbot. And that's the one we're going to do. That's for more like continuous interactions. You ask a question, you get a response. You ask another question, you get a response. So how do you design it? Well, really simple. You have your Google Home. Then you use the API.ai service, which we're going to focus on here. And then you need to have some kind of backend that processes all the things and makes a response. I used Firebase functions specifically. So I've been writing JavaScript again. I'm going to start a support group for those who are interested later. It's really, yeah. So the interesting thing here is that you can replace, like, all the components here can be replaced with something else. You could, instead of having the Google Home, you could have a Slack or Facebook Messenger. Instead of API AI, you can write all that machine learning stuff yourself if you're into that. And instead of Firebase, you could choose, I don't know, Amazon or whatever server you want, because it's basically just a webhook, a REST API you have to implement. So my use case is I want to create a chatbot for Droidcon Italy. I want to be able to ask about, like, what is who is speaking about this, when is this talk, etc., etc. So we're going to make a very simple thing. So I made my own diagram. Looks like this. I like diagrams, I think. So we have a welcome intent. We're going to talk about intent. It's not an Android intent. I promise there will not be any Android stuff here. So it's just the same thing they use for. But you have welcome intent. You trigger the agent. It says back to you, hey, welcome to the Droidcon Italy chatbot. And then you can either ask, like, what will Erik Hellman talk about? It goes into the intent that you have mapped to that trigger, so to say, and it talks back to you, like, I found an event. Erik Hellman will be talking about working with Google Assistant, and it also says when. Another way is, like, if you have like two-stage thing, so you ask, is there a talk about Android things? Then I would like you to list all the events, the talks about Android things, and let me choose which one I want to hear more about. That one is a little bit more advanced. So there are two ways to do it. There are two things I'm going to show. Working with Google Assistant starts at 11:40. I don't think that's right. Anyway, so my business plan, I'm going to make money with this, of course. So I'm going to define the API.ai intents and entities. That's the first thing we're going to look at. Like, what are these intents and what are the entities? We're going to create a webhook, which is basically a REST API endpoint that receives whatever it is that API.ai generates from parsing the input that we give it. And then we make money from this somehow. So let's look at a demo. First live demo here. Oops. Of course, the internet won't work now, probably. You all did shut off your Wi-Fi, right? Come on. Worked a minute ago. Let's give it a second. Yep, there we go. Oh, no. Let's try one more time. It works so fine just before here, so. Like, if you're still on the Wi-Fi, please. I can go on without this as well. I have a demo recorded as well, so we'll see it later. Yeah, okay, let's leave it for now. Let's try it there. That failed miserably. So, the problem here is that you are mapping a user input, a text string that you give it, saying, in my case I say, when will Erik Hellman be giving a presentation? You take that one and you give it to API AI and you say, so this is one way the user will input, but like you can't have the user just using one particular sentence, and you need to pick out the entities, the data in each sentence. In this case, Erik Hellman is the entity. It doesn't carry any special ID or primary key or anything that you can use to look up something. So what we need to do is a full text search. So we get, what API AI will give us is the intent. In this case, yes, you're looking for a particular event for this speaker. Here is the speaker's name. And then we do a full text search in our data. And we get that back. But what about conflicting values? There are two Sebastianos in this being speakers here. So what if I ask what about Sebastiano? When is he giving a talk, and which one do I mean? So there are real challenges with this. So variations of the whole thing, conflicting values, and also the fact that you actually can't refer to a specific, like you cannot have like one, like a mapping that we have. When we write our app, we have a recycler view and you have an item there and it has an ID. You don't have that. You just have the real world values to work with. So because the data I have is basically the thing that the Droidcon app works with. Yes, saying this. You happen to be on the top of the JSON structure. Okay, good. So the speaker's JSON looks like that. It's very simple. And the events, which is basically for each talk, looks like the one below. That is the data I need to search when I get the intent. Okay, Chrome actually crashed on me here. That's really... Do we have anyone from Google here? No. Just give me a second. I like cats. Just saying. Okay, let's continue. Isn't it typical? Like, it worked when I sat down there. Maybe I should... No, never mind. So, anyway. So this is the data I need to search for. So this is the screenshot. So this is how the API AI console looks like. So you go into entities, and you add a new one. In this case, I've added the entity called speaker. There is a nice web interface if you want to like add stuff individually like that, but you can also like upload an entire CSV or JSON file containing all the data that you want to define here. So I used the CSV thing, so I basically took the JSON you saw before, extracted all the speaker names, split them up, because the variations would be like I can ask about the first name or the last name only. So you have the full name as the entity that we're going to search for, and the variations are the first name and last name. Now this is interesting. For instance, API can't deal with special characters, so because we have an @ character here, there was a speaker in this data called Party Time. I don't know. I'd love to meet her, or him. So I have to remove that one. There is also it's not listed here, but it's Sebastiano Poggi, that's Sebastiano. And there is another variation of Sebastiano, so it's actually going to just match the first one that it finds there. So even if you have conflicting values, API don't want to tell you about that. So this requires some considerations. There is an API towards API.ai. That's a lot of API, which you can use from your own backend to upload data to this, define new entities, etc. So you can actually have this automated as your data changes. So it will look like this afterwards. You see like Mariano Viviani, Mario, and it's defined the two variations after that one. So topics was the other thing. I was supposed to be able to ask about first the speaker's name, but I also wanted to be able to ask about a specific topic. So I just defined the different topics. I looked at the schedule for this event, and I defined them up here. Now, not all of them matches a specific talk. There are some here who are not included in the talk, but I just included them anyway. So this one I defined manually by just looking at the descriptions and the names of the talks. Android things, the synonyms are Android things and IoT. Bluetooth has BLE as a action as well. API.ai. No, it's actually not working. Okay, never mind. I have a video that's going to show you the demo as well. And finally, the third type of entity is the event itself, the name of the event. In this case, it's the talk, so to say, the presentation. So there's like Android things for IoT, and the API AI console, you need to have at least one variation, so I put the same thing there. So what this API will give you when it sends the data to your REST API is basically a parameter that you can extract and get that specific entity for that intent. Now, intents has nothing to do with intents on Android. It's completely different things, just the same name. So what it means here is I define a number of sentences, like when is Sebastiano Poggi presentation? Yeah, that's misspelled. Sorry. What is Erik Hellman presenting about? Or what will Wayne Pirkaski talk about, etc. So I define different variations of how the user will interact with this specific intent. And then the machine learning part in API will train this and do this magic thing itself. It's actually quite magic. And match the user input to this specific intent. So even if I only define like a few here, it will know that if I change the name to something different, if I say another name, it will still match to the same intent. You have to give a specific action to the intent. So I define it as lookup-speaker-event. This is the function that you're going to map to in your backend. You're going to see that in a moment. Yeah. So the challenges with intent. So the challenges with the entities is the multiple values and variations and stuff that you have to come up with. The challenges with the intent is how to predict what phrase the user will say. Because when the user triggers your chatbot, they don't know what you defined. So you have to try to predict this in a smart way and trust that the machine learning part of API AI is smart enough. You also have to figure out how to efficiently map the entities in the sentences so that you can parse it later. That can be a little bit tricky. The console they have there helps a lot, but you usually have to fine-tune stuff as well. So then you need the fulfillment. So when API AI is done parsing everything and extracting the entities and finding out which intent it is, it calls a webhook, or you define which webhook it is. It's a REST API probably, usually, that you implement. So I decided to use Firebase functions, cloud functions, So the last couple of days, I've been sitting looking at this a lot. How many here have think that their Gradle build times are slow? Anyone done Firebase functions, JavaScript? I'm glad to go back to my Android stuff. So every time I want to deploy these 3 different functions, it took 1 minute. So I'm sitting there I thought JavaScript was supposed to be fast. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, JavaScript, that was fun. Haven't done that in a while. So this is what you start with, or what I started with. You import the actions on Google API for Node.js. Get the API assistant, API AI assistant even. And then I imported Firebase functions, because that's what I'm using to implement my endpoint. And I just have that data hard-coded as JSON files, which I include. So it would be a database otherwise. But I just made it simple. Static JSON in this case for the demo. So I have the speakers and I have the events, which events is the talks. You already saw that JSON part. The second part here is the fulfillment webhook. So I use Firebase functions to export a function that will be called every time someone calls the API. I log the request headers and bodies, so I can check them in the log console. I also wrap the request and response using the API assistant. And then I define the lookup event and generating response. It's a function. We're going to look at that in detail. But finally, what you do is you create a map where you map the intent. That's the action that I defined earlier, like lookup speaker event. And I map that to a function. So that is a function that's going to be called, and the function will receive an assistant that is populated with all the entities that you had defined for that intent. And then I call assistant handler request for this one, and the API will take care of the rest. Finally, the lookup function looks like this. So when I'm asking about a specific speaker, I extract the speaker name from the API assistant, and I call my function for looking that up in the JSON, and check that it's not null. Then I find the event that speaker is in. I'm not doing any error handling here if there is one speaker has multiple talks. And then I call API the assistant.tell, which then speaks the response to the user back in the Google Home or whatever messaging service or whatever you have defined at the other end. One thing to remember here is when you call assistant.tell, it will also end the conversation, so it will go back to what it was before. So let's instead say the more complicated one, the two-step thing. I ask about a specific topic, I get a list of events, and I want to hear more about one of those. So the first part is find an event by topic. So I extract the argument topic. In this case, it will be a different intent. I will get the one you asked about. I find the matching events for this one, and I loop through them and construct the response sentence, basically. It can be, again, not doing any error handling here or anything, so it could be very long, this one. Basically appending the text as we move ahead. And then I end the response with, which one do you want to hear more about? I also provide some no input prompts. A no input prompt is if the Google Home Assistant doesn't hear you answering, it will ask you 3 times, or actually will ask you 2 times. Again, which event did you want to hear about? Say the name of the event the second time. And the third time, and this is a little bit tricky because it's not covered in the documentation, so you have to go down in the source code for the Assistant API. The third no input prompt, if you don't respond in time, will terminate the conversation as well. So it's okay, bye for now. So I call assistant.ask instead of assistant.tell, which generates the response back to the API AI, which will send the response back to the Google Home. with the response and the no input prompts. So that will read up that text to the user, so the user can then tell back which of these events were you interested in. Now, I haven't covered the fact that I say I want to hear about the second one. I expect the user to read up the tell me about and the title of that talk. So that's what I'm expecting here. So I'm expecting an event name being feedback. That's why I had the events as a entity as well. Cool. And then I call tell, which will end the conversation. I update my action map with all these functions, and I'm ready to go. So the API Assistant API, AI Assistant API, I feel like I'm only saying API in this presentation, has a bunch of nice features. You can, for instance, tell the message and end the conversation, ask within that one, get the argument. You can also get the raw input, what the user actually say the entire sentence if you want to parse it manually. And of course, handle request and how that works. Okay, I'm not going to do the live demo. I was thinking about this, so I actually made a screen recording. So let's look at that one instead. Let's see. So I start by connecting actions in Google to my Cloud Functions project. I press preview, and it will tell me to open the web simulator. So I press start on that one. I authenticate with my own user for the web simulator. This is 2 different sites. So it will go back here. This will be the test version. I don't think I have any sound right now, so you'll have to read the text instead. It actually reads up this for you. So I could press the microphone there again. So this is a prompt I get saying that now we're actually starting the Droidcon Italy chatbot. Next step. When is Erik Hellman giving a presentation? Yeah. I feel like I could play this video a little bit faster. Yep, and then it reads it up. And the second one here. Is there a talk? Kotlin, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the thing was that the Google Assistant will end the conversation when I just ask about a specific speaker. So I actually trigger the bot once more. There's a little bit design flow there. So now I can ask again, is there a talk about Kotlin? And so now it reads up the events it found. Now it's also only one there, so I'll basically just type that one. Yeah, so we'll try build tools. Yeah, probably more matches for build tools. Since it was an ask response, it keeps the conversation going. And there, now we found more. Oh, come on. Final thing. Yeah, and it lists this one, tells me where it is, who's speaking about it, and the whole description. Okay. Back to the presentation. So that's at least it works. It is a bit shaky, so sometimes when you get errors, it's a little bit hard to interpret where the error happens, because you got like the Google Home, you got or in this case, the web simulator, you got the API AI, and then you have your own webhook. So it's a lot of things can happen. No, so how would you design this? So this is my bedroom. This is my Philips Hue lights I have there, which I have connected to my Google Home. I'm wondering if I can. Yeah, anyway, so because there's audio here, so I'll skip that one. But let's get to this one, the design principles. Google listed a bunch of design principles, which are nice, but I feel like there are missing things in this one. They're not being clear enough. So I have my own design principles that I'd like you to remember. Don't annoy the user. So the thing I have with my Philips Hue integration, I love those lamps. I use them all the time. My wife likes it as well, so we can like dim them easily. But we only use the app basically, because whenever I ask something which uses the Philips Hue lights, the Google Home reads back a long sentence saying it talks more than I do. Super annoying. So I'm not using it. Also, it's the same thing all the time. Yes, I know I have to say turn off the lights, not the light. But it keeps reading out the long error response every time. I think it should figure that one out. So think of these things as well when you design it. So what if you're not having a Google Home? Can't you use this? Yes, you can. There are super many different integrations points with API AI. So like you can use Facebook Messenger, Slack, Twitter, etc., etc. There is Amazon Alexa. Where are you, Mario? There you are. So there are tons of different ways you can integrate this with other services. Now, what if none of this matches your thing? What if you write your own Android app, which we all do? Well, there are SDKs as well, so you can write your own. You can download the Android SDK and use that one directly in your app. How you get the input to API AI doesn't matter. It could be voice, it could be text, or it could be like some other action you do. Well, text would make sense and voice would make sense. I don't know what else there is. So there are many possibilities for using this to do your own stuff. I'm using this to actually integrate with Jira, to create tickets in Jira through Slack, which was nice because I don't like Jira interface. But anyway, so the API AI Android client, you can go to GitHub, it's open source there, so you can use that one. That was all. Thank you for listening.